Kia ora. Where do you store random objects of potential practicality? The batteries, plasters and paper clips you accumulate in life. This podcast is pretty much that place. You have opened the audio drawer. Here we're hoarding recordings for New Zealand Baptists, because one day this episode could be just the thing. What is it that makes good governance? What do governors actually do? Charles Hewlett talks to Mel Wilson about eldership and governance. Mel has worked as a project manager in the non-for-profit sector for the past 10 years, also holding governance roles and sitting on funding committees. Mel has been involved in the establishment of a number of charitable organisations and has experience working both on boards and for boards. She is passionate about seeing the community sector thrive through strong leadership and has most recently been involved in delivering mentoring programs for leaders in the community sector. Mel was a member of the Baptist Assembly Council for 4 years and is currently an elder at North Point Baptist Church in Taranaki and a trustee of North Point Community Trust. Find additional resources including discussion questions at lifelonglearning.nz/elders. This recording is from the Better Church Elders video series. Thanks to the Carey Centre for Lifelong Learning for producing this free resource.
Hi Mel, it's very nice to be able to talk with you around the area of eldership and governance. You've had a lot of experience with governance, both within the church and wider, particularly not-for-profit groups. Perhaps we could start by talking about what is governance?
Yeah, so I see that there's sort of 3 key areas around governance. So the first is around providing oversight and accountability to ensure that the organisation is acting in compliance with legal responsibilities. And then within that there is a stewardship role of stewarding that which we've been entrusted with, so whether that is people or resources or property or finances, ensuring that we are managing those well and carrying out sort of a duty to care for those that we've been entrusted with. And then the third part of governance is around the vision and direction of the organisation. So looking at, what does this organisation exist for, what is our mission and purpose, and how are we ensuring that we deliver on that in the present, but also looking ahead into the future.
So keeping those things in mind then, what is it that governors do? What is their role?
Yeah, so I guess governors or people on a governance board act collectively together to carry out those functions. So they typically meet together fairly regularly, and they meet to monitor and question and clarify what is happening within the activities of the organisation, to provide that oversight and accountability. They make decisions collectively to carry out the governance functions and to make decisions about the strategy and the vision and direction of the organisation. So they look ahead at what are the key issues on the horizon here and how are we going to navigate those.
So from your experience then, what do you think it is that makes for good governance?
Yeah, so for good governance, I think that idea of being forward-looking is really important. So it's so easy to get caught up in day-to-day management and what's happening right now on the present, and to not be looking ahead at what do we need to be doing to remain relevant or to sustain the organisation going forward. I think, where it happens well is where there is real clarity of vision and direction and mission. So people are focused on that. It's not just about what are we doing today or what program are we running here, or what service are we delivering right now, or what donors are we looking after today, but actually how are we meeting the needs of those who we hope will become part of this organisation. How are we navigating that? I think good governance is participatory, so you are on a board for your perspective, for your experience, so contributing, being an active contributor to discussion, to strategic planning, to those conversations is really important. Not being afraid to ask questions, even if it feels like they might be dumb or everybody else kind of knows the answer and you're the only one that doesn't. I think it's really key to see that, to have confidence in the perspective that you hold, and the fact that each of those perspectives creates a better outcome for the mission. So with that, I guess, with good governance, there is a trust and respect for the other people that you're working with, that you value their perspective, that you're all there because you're committed to the mission, and that through everybody's contribution, you're going to achieve a better outcome.
So I guess then there's the other side. We've probably all experienced it, but what does bad governance look like, do you think?
So I guess in a lot of cases where there isn't clarity of the vision or the direction of the mission and the strategy of an organisation, I think governance can become very reactive as opposed to proactive. You can sort of get mission drift, or it's hard to know. It's hard having a good framework, having a good vision and mission, understanding that, being on the same page creates a really good framework for subsequent decision making, and means that you can be a lot more proactive about what you're doing, and where the organisation's headed. I read a book called Governance and Ministry, and they described, who you're there to serve as the mission of the organisation, and they described it in a faith-based context as the small piece of God's will that has been entrusted to you in the organisation. And I really liked the way that was articulated, that, what is God's will for us here and now, but also moving into the future with what we see on the horizon. I think process is really key. So in my experience, in a lot of the roles that I've been involved in, where there has been critique or people being very unhappy with decisions, often it's not necessarily the outcome of that decision, but the process through which that decision was sort of arrived at, I suppose, that people feel unhappy about. So I think having really good processes in place, clarity around how decision making happens, how we consult with those who these decisions affect, is a key part of good governance. In terms of poor governance, I think where you get individual agendas, pet projects, people being there to sort of try and achieve their own aims rather than the collective goals, that can become really difficult. And where the role becomes a status, I think, as well. So you then develop a sense of ownership as opposed to stewardship, which I think can be detrimental to, the organisation. And I think another thing that can have a big impact on governance is having a real clear understanding of the role for people going into it. So real clear expectations of what the role is, and what's involved, and what the responsibilities are, and what the expectations are.
I mean, I was often taught about the difference between management and governance. Is that important?
Absolutely. Okay. So I guess thinking about when you're focused on the vision and direction, if you get too caught up in the day-to-day and the management and that, when you're too caught up in the detail, that's not what you're there for in these roles. But I think, where there's confusion about where the organisation's headed, or there's confusion about the role and that, then often you can see that happen. And it becomes challenging for everybody, I think.
Do you think, are elders governors?
Yeah, I mean, legally, we act as a governance board, so I would say yes. I think that probably the way the role is often communicated, there is a high degree of emphasis put on eldership being a spiritual leadership role. So I think perhaps people don't always see it as a governance role, or but certainly from a legal perspective, yes.
But there must be some big differences, I guess, from your experience, from a faith-based governance to other types?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think, well, first of all, I think elders carry out other roles beyond just governance functions typically. So there's sort of the spiritual oversight and pastoral care roles that come into it, which are more unique to a church context. And then, I think the context of discernment being part of how we make decisions, so discerning the will of God together, how we build that into the way we do governance in a church is unique as well, and requires us to perhaps operate differently, or use different processes of decision making at times also.
So it's clearly important, I guess, then who becomes a governor or an elder in the context we're talking about. I'd love to chat with you for a little while on that. We hear a lot about boards, governors developing a skills matrix so they can determine skills that are required. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? How do we ensure that we get the right people in these roles?
I think, for sure a board matrix or skills matrix could be really helpful, a helpful thing to consider, and look at how we could put that in place around eldership. Definitely looking at, what is our mission here, what is our purpose, how do we ensure we've got the right skills around the table to deliver on that well. So that may be, tangible, practical skills in terms of, particular areas like finance or whatever, but it may also be what perspectives do we believe are really important here for us to achieve what we're trying to achieve here well, to engage with different groups or whatever. I think you can kind of, I think of governance in this area as a bit of a spectrum. So on the one end you have kind of a secular governance model, which, you might see in a not-for-profit or, a kind of parachurch organisation, where perhaps the spiritual elements of discernment and that kind of thing are quite limited. It's more of a secular side, and then but if you swing the other way, you can get a highly spiritual kind of model of governance where perhaps there isn't as much emphasis placed on the kind of core governance functions as what would be ideal as well. So, I think of that verse in James 2 about faith without works, and how, on the secular end perhaps you can have, works without faith, and then on the other side you can perhaps have faith without works as well. So, for a kind of down the middle faith-based governance, I think you want to get a good balance of the spiritual and the more practical skills that are required to ensure the organisation can deliver on its mission well. Yeah. And part of that, I think, is about how we set expectations around the role, how we communicate that, how we are providing opportunities for people to become familiar with core governance functions and how we carry those out with practices or tools that are really useful, like a board skills matrix or having a set calendar of reviewing things like policies and risk and finances and all of those kinds of things, but creating plenty of space for strategic planning and prayer and discernment and that around that as well. So I think Martin Norrie's book on governance is really helpful for considering those things. Yeah.
So Mel, I know that mentoring is really important for you. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about board development and training and upskilling. What works well there?
Well, I think if I think of my time on Assembly Council with the Baptist Union, there were a couple of people who were part of Assembly Council when I joined. I was initially co-opted on as a younger leader, and they took time to sit with me and talk through some of the things that were perhaps like institutional jargon that I might not be familiar with, or give me some kind of historical context to various things, and encouragement that was really useful for me. So I think having opportunities for people to gain experience at a board level, but also providing them with some support like mentoring or training is a really helpful thing to do and gives people confidence to grow into those roles. I think having a succession planning as an area of focus for a board is really important. We've talked a little bit about when a role becomes status, when you develop a sense of ownership as opposed to stewardship, and I think that by putting in place a practice around succession planning and going, okay, how are we going to develop new people and endorse new people to move into our roles, helps to maintain that sense of we are stewards here of that which has been entrusted to us, and we are actively seeking to build other leaders up who can carry that on for us moving forward.
We are filming this in New Zealand. We have a biculturalism, and the treaty is very important. Obviously these things we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about governance.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. In terms of for us looking in our environment today and also moving into the future. The importance that we place on the treaty and on biculturalism is going to be key, I believe, and something that we do need to be looking at. How do we engage with this, and how do we do this well, and how do we create space for other voices, and from a multicultural perspective as well. And there's a range of other issues that are going to be very real issues for the young people of today. How are we as stewards of these organisations looking at how we can navigate those and ensure that our younger people are well equipped to navigate those in the world that they live in.
Well, it's been very good to be able to talk with you today.
Yeah.
So thanks for giving us your time.
Oh, thank you.